Representative Newton, welcome to a new version of the Tiger's Den, sponsored by the Suncoast Tiger Bay Club, the Alliance for Bayway Communities, and Eckerd College's Lifelong Learning Communities. It's a pleasure to have you here and appreciate your patience well into the evening to allow the community to get a better understanding of you and what you aspire to do as the next mayor of the city of St. Petersburg. Just a quick housekeeping note, Mike Milvain from the Skyway Marina District is here as our timer. He'll give you a 5-second warning. I will keep my microphone down, and when I'm lifting it to my mouth, that means your time is up. And I'll tell you the length of time for each of our questions. And so we're going to dive right in right now with a little bit on your personal biography. Could you give us your elevator pitch on who you are, your background and qualifications, and why you're the most qualified candidate to serve as the next mayor of the city of St. Petersburg? And this is a 90-second answer, please.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, my strength, O Lord, my Redeemer. A good evening, and I first want to recognize my wife, Melissa, of 31 years, and my daughter, Chelsea. I was born and raised in Midtown South St. Pete, the most impoverished area in all of Pinellas County. And it's been that way for the last 5 county commission terms, or 20 years, or 2 decades. I served under 3 mayors, Mayor Baker, Mayor Foster, and Mayor Kreisman. I served 8 years on the St. Pete City Council. I have the longest tenure in local St. Pete governance. I also served 4 years in the legislature where I built bridges and relationships. So I returned home now to move my city forward with those relationships that I built. I think now is the time to make sure we have a leader and a mayor who's not partisan. We've got to get rid of this partisan bickering to take care of areas of greatest neglect. We also make sure we have a relationship with Tallahassee. What makes me the most best candidate is from day one, as a member, a life member of the Florida House, I get to step on the floor and lobby with my colleagues, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and the Governor. With those relationships, I brought back millions of dollars and survived a Republican veto pen by having an active record of voting across the aisle and working for results. And I'm going to continue to do that and fight for St. Pete in that way as your next mayor.
Thank you very much. So related to that, if you could, please connect your personal story, having grown up here in St. Petersburg, to your vision for St. Pete's relationship with the greater Tampa Bay region, the rest of this country, and how you would position the city to be a community of consequence throughout the United States. A 60-second answer.
Thank you. To me, that'll be primarily easy because we have a beautiful city. Our city's thriving and is growing in spite of who's in the mayor's office. What we need to do is focus on our areas that have been neglected. We need to make sure that we make sure all tides rise and be able to be there for everybody, not just talking about it, being about it. For that, you need relationships to bring resources back, to have a grocery store in Midtown, to redevelop the 86 acres, to find a way, if we need to keep Major League Baseball here while we creating opportunities like affordable housing and jobs for locals here in the city that can keep that money, and that money will turn over 7 or 8 times before it leaves the city. But I want to make sure that we are looking forward. We're looking at every opportunity we're able to go out and benchmark and make our city better. And I've done that for 8 years on the council. I've done that with the legislature. I'm going to continue to do that as mayor.
Thank you. The city currently has an economic development strategy, the Grow Smartest strategy, targeting 5 key sectors. Do you think that's still relevant in a post-COVID world? And if not, how does the region approach economic development moving forward in partnership with area educational institutions to create a pipeline of readiness for the economic opportunities of the 21st century? A 60-second answer, please.
The short answer is no, it's not relevant now. What we need to do is make sure we have using our education ecosystem. We have St. Pete College in Midtown that's invested $40 million. They want to build a STEMS middle school. They want to train the kids in STEMS programs. They want to create them a situation where they can get the highest paying jobs. We want to make sure we got our workforce that are ready for tomorrow and to be able to compete in this city, to have jobs, to be able to live in this city. When you talk about affordability, it's all relative to the money you make. And if we don't provide opportunities for these young kids, then that's not going to happen. We've reimagined the career source. We're going to get back into vocational, not just back into it. We have money in our job growth fund. We've already partnered with St. Pete College and Lockheed Martin to create jobs out there with that fund. And we want to continue to build on that as we go forward. So that's what's going to be the importance of me. The rest of the city, I think, is doing well in spite of, if you've been to St. Pete, it's beautiful. It's just some areas need a little bit more attention.
Thank you. Related to that, do you believe climate change poses a specific threat to the city? And specific to the city's coastal high hazard area, can you speak to your thoughts on how we responsibly develop and redevelop such a large percentage of the city's land located in this zone, and what the role of the next mayor is to lead this conversation? A 60-second answer, please.
The role of the next mayor to lead development in coastal high hazard, and we do have the effects of climate change. And I like to report for the first time the legislature has put money in the budget for the effects of climate change. And I want to go up in the lobby and bring some of those funds back. As you know, we had a major disaster with sewage in this area. And I was one of the only two on council that voted against that. But what happened was we ended up dumping millions of gallons of sewage in town, which you may not know. We service sewage for Gulfport, Treasure Island, and St. Pete Beach. So we need to make sure we have the capacity online to address that. Also, you need to make sure you got, as it pertains to development, you have development right and property rights. So it's going to be a tight hole. But at the same time, smart development with keeping in mind the effects of climate change, I think we'll be able to do just that. But the 86-acre trop site is going to help a little bit more to ease some of those areas if we do it right.
Thank you. So since you brought up sewage, we're going to go right there. You were on the council when there were significant sewage overflows in 2015 and 16, resulting in a state consent order requiring hundreds of millions of dollars of improvements. If you look out over the next 2 decades, that reaches beyond billions of dollars in required improvements to our wastewater and water treatment system. What is your position on the need for future funding and where that funding will come from? A 60-second answer, please.
We're going to need funding, and that goes back to just what I was talking about, relationships and bridges. You're going to need to be able to go to Tallahassee and draw down some of that infrastructure money. I just talked about they got money in the budget for the effect of climate change. Some of this stuff is going to be needed to rebuild our infrastructure. Because we don't have a relationship currently with Tallahassee, you suffered a 43% increase in your sewage rates. When you go home, look at your water bill. My wife and I, our water bill was $80. Now it's $140. $52 of that is sewage. No one thought about the seniors. You never had the seniors mentioned one time on council when they were jacking those rates. You're talking about people living on fixed incomes. So you're not going to be able to find 43% more for food and medicine. So if you don't have a relationship to be able to draw down those funds from Tallahassee and use them in the city, you're going to have to keep trying to build this infrastructure on the backs of the people who cannot afford it.
Thank you. In 2017, we saw Hurricane Irma leading to over 6 million people fleeing the state before the arrival of the storm. Since then, the state and St. Petersburg have only continued to grow. What are your plans to improve shelter-in-place options in the event of major storms in the city? A 30-second answer, please.
I would look at, and believe it or not, the South Side is the highest land. I would look at opportunities there to be able to make shelters that are fortified. Any new buildings that we make, any city buildings, and if we partner with any more development, that they have enough to make sure those buildings would withstand, I say Miami hurricane standards, if you will, to make sure we can shelter in place. But by being in the highest area, you don't have to have that problem. We never had to evacuate, and I live in South St. Pete, so.
Thank you. How will your administration assure residents that current development, including particularly downtown development, can be adequately handled by our public infrastructure? 30-second answer.
By making them pay their fair share for impact. You know, we often waive a lot of impact fees, so that means it passes down to the taxpayers to pay for that infrastructure. You know, we did it with the Dolly, we did it with some of the Mahaffey, and a lot of those buildings. I think, if I'm correct, I don't think any of that development inside the downtown CRA pays impact. And unfortunately, you know, I asked this question when I was on council. Is there going to be bathrooms and toilets in all those buildings? And if it is, where is that stuff going to go when they flush?
Appreciate it. As downtown zoning generally allows for large-scale development, how do you propose that we keep this Main Street feeling of Central Avenue and the historic charm of the city that makes St. Pete so special throughout the state of Florida? A 60-second answer.
You would have to do that through zoning and planning. I think right now they allow a lot of density, so you see a lot of that happen through sprawl up and down Central Avenue. What's happening now, we got a lot of out-of-state, billionaires or millionaires coming in, buying up blocks, building stuff high as they can get it, blocking out the sun for people that want solar. What we're going to need to do going forward is revisit that and to make sure that we got the proper zoning in place. Because truth be told, if you own the property and it's allowed, you get to build it. It's called property rights. But when they come in asking for variance and zone changes, that means it does not fit. If it does not fit, we shouldn't be doing it.
Thank you. Question from a recent Eckerd College graduate. How do you plan to control the rising cost of living in St. Pete? Locals are being priced out of the market due to rapidly increasing rents, skyrocketing real estate prices, and stagnating salaries. A 60-second response, please.
My daughter is a recent graduate at FIU. She's experiencing the same thing. My philosophy is if you're paying $1,000 to $2,000 a month rent, you're already paying a mortgage. It's just not yours. I want to make sure they have the proper financial literacy so they can get a mortgage and own a home. People take a lot of young people that want to own homes. I would say different. The only thing that's going to sustain that the rent or the mortgage you pay is ownership, because it's going to go up. I mean, I supported $15 an hour, which now is $20 an hour. But if you get that amount of money, your landlord's going to raise your rent because you got $20 an hour. Also, you can't sustain those rates. So another thing, again, our educational ecosystem, make sure these people have high quality skill, certifications, if you will. The governor's going to, all in toward vocational. I'm myself possess an AS degree in electronics engineering from ITT. I think I turned out okay. And you're able to get into the employment sector quicker, making good wages for high jobs. In the meantime, I support wholeheartedly Habitat. Habitat is the only one providing affordable home ownership, equity, and generational wealth. So we want to follow that model. So we're going to continue in that conversation, and we're going to ask your wife and daughter afterwards if you turned out okay or not. Making sure everybody's still paying attention here. On affordable housing, the numbers are staggering. The latest report is that we have 40,000 burdened households in the city of St. Petersburg. Burdened meaning that they're paying more than 30% of their monthly income on their housing. What are your strategies on how we can dramatically start to bring that number down, particularly for folks that are earning less than 80% of the area median income, both for the renter buyer and the builder developer? A 60-second response, please. I would say the government controls that, because if they're getting housing, they pay so much, $1,300, $1,400 a month for housing. So the people that are renting the place want to get that kind of money. But unfortunately, an individual if you made $15 an hour, that would equate to $800 a month that you would be earning. I mean, $800 a week. So you wouldn't have enough money to pay that kind of rent. So again, what I'm talking about doing is making sure they have the credentials to be able to earn these jobs, these STEM level jobs that we can bring in and get the training in for these young people so they can afford those. That's going to be short term. Long term, when we get to redeveloping that 86-acre trop site, we can set aside some property for that. If you want to do rent control and try to control what people do with their private property, do it on your government property. Do it on property you own, because that way you won't be taking from anybody. Because when you force them into a rent control situation, it's a taking. Affordable housing is just a slogan. People have been using that for years. Affordability is relative. If I have $20 million, I can buy a condo at the top of one of those tallest buildings downtown. That's affordable for me. I want to make sure people can earn a wage so they can stay in this city. And the way you can do that is through education ecosystem like Eckerd, St. Pete College, and USF St. Pete. Thank you. I appreciate throwing Eckerd in there too. You've said the decision on how to move forward with the redevelopment of Tropicana field site should be left to our next mayor. Assuming that's you, what details can you give us on your process and priorities in making something happen, and how that process will differ from the current one that the Kreisman administration has been pursuing over the past 2 years? A 60-second response. Thank you. Well, you look at what they have in front of you, and what you can keep, the rest of you throw out. I won't be all in on that, because I don't know what kind of backroom deals were cut or what was promised, and because I represent the people, I want to be transparent for them. I fought for them for the 8 years I was on council, and I will continue to fight for them. Now, that said, my plan for the Trop site is to, if we can keep the Rays there. When I got on council in 2007, the Rays wanted to move their entire baseball operation to 15 acres. I would say move that toward MLK. Put your baseball operations on 15 acres. If you want a split season, I'll support that as long as St. Pete name is in there somewhere. Because if we're going to pay the freight, we should have a name recognition on that also. St. Pete, Montreal, or whatever. Also, we can do smart development on that property. for affordable housing. We can bring in businesses. We can also try to repay some of the damage that was done. If you don't know, that was our Black Wall Street. 85 cents every dollar that came into those black businesses was stayed into that community. But when they ran the interstate through there on purpose and then dropped the trop on top of it, it was dire. So now you got impoverished areas just to the across the street from somewhere where they make millions, if not billions of dollars. So I want to make sure with that $1 billion development potential, first and foremost, I want to try to get it drawn back into the Southside CRA. That way the money will flow that way and once and for all rid that area of greatest neglect. And then as to the raise, if we can partner and come up with an agreement that's good for the taxpayers, the raising citizens, I will do that. What I would do different is the mayor used to go in by himself. As a strong mayor, I want to bring myself there, our legal department, and council. Because mayor does not vote, council vote. And I only need 5 of them, not all 8 of them, to get something done once and for all.
Thank you. Our next series of questions is on your philosophy of leadership. And the first one is probably near and dear to your heart as it relates to the Tallahassee Republican majority that's been there for quite some time now. And in spite of that, there's been probably a number of years of a relationship characterized more by animosity than one of collaboration between St. Pete and Tallahassee. How do you plan on changing that and working with the Tallahassee Republican majority to benefit the city? A 30-second answer.
Already doing it. I was able to bring back, and we're in the pandemic, when we left Tallahassee, that budget last year, I was able to bring back over $6 million and survive a $1 billion Republican veto pen with the relationships and bridges that I built with my voting record. I get calls from Governor DeSantis saying, Newt, you got anything in the budget? I got calls from Governor Scott, now Senator Scott. Newt, you got anything in the budget? I do not see party. When I represent District 70, which includes parts of this area, Manatee, Sarasota, Pinellas, they're some of the most challenged areas. And the only way you can get resources back, you got to be able to work with the people up there. You ain't got to love them, but you got to be able to work with them to get resources and bring them home. I've done that numerous times. I got legislation passed. I brought home appropriations. The relationship's important. Me being the only member, lifetime member in this race, I'll be able to do that day one.
Thank you. What is the role of the citizenry here in St. Petersburg in generating the city's annual budget? 60-second answer.
I think the citizens should have input, a lot of input. We should go near and far and talk to everybody we can and invite them in to let them see what we're doing because they're paying the freight. My attention is going to be first and foremost back to these neighborhoods and these communities. As you know, for the longest, everything has been downtown. But the people that own these homes and own these properties, they're paying the freight. Their money is what's keeping that going because there's no impact fees being collected down there. So I want to focus back on them. I want them to be the one. My oath of office says I'm a recipient of public funds. So by virtue of that, I work for the public. So if they got a problem, I got a problem. I governed that way in 2007. I'm going to govern that way in 2021 as your mayor. We're the stewards of the taxpayers' assets, resources, and money. So if we're going to do away with anything or damage anything, you will get a vote, not input, a vote. Input is for lawsuits. So when they ask you if you seek the people's input, you can say yes. But if they never ask you if you used it, but if you get to vote on it, then I can look you in the eye and say, hey, it went sideways, but you voted for it.
Thank you. City's single largest annual expenditure is on law enforcement. How would you ensure that the St. Pete Police Department is a transparent, accountable body for all citizens, including particularly for the city's minority population? A 60-second answer.
Easy. When I was on council, I required through a new business item. You got 2 people still in this race that can file new business items tomorrow. Through a new business item, I had the police chief and the fire chief come before us quarterly because I didn't want them coming in when there was a mistake or oops to try to explain to council how they went wrong and over the TVs explain it away. But I want them to come in for 2 things. Number one, to make sure they had everything they need. Because that's what they everything they need to get the job done. If you know the core responsibility of local government, it's public safety, which is fire, police, EMT, infrastructure, sanitation, water, sewage, and garbage, and then the recreation, the other stuff that we have, the feel-good stuff. But I want to make sure I'm bringing them in, having being transparent. I mean, I was the one that fought hard to have our agenda reviews televised because that's how we spend 100% of the money. But they don't want the revolution televised. They fought against that. But I'm real big on transparency and not selective transparency. I mean, we're going to be transparent.
Thank you. And our final question this evening, Rick Kreisman has served the city for nearly 8 years now as our mayor. Can you reflect with us your thoughts on what Mayor Kreisman has done well, where he's fallen short, and what you've learned from observing his leadership that will inform how you would serve the community as our mayor? 90-second answer, please.
Wow. Well, I thank the mayor for serving. We didn't have a really great relationship because when he went to go into mayor, as you know, the juveniles are near and dear to me. We have a lot of juvenile crime and people shooting it down there and everything. Well, I hail from those poor communities. You know, single divorce mom raising 8 kids, government subsidies, food stamps, welfare, government cheese, free lunch, reduced lunch, summer jobs, after school jobs. You're looking at it. I'm a living testimony of what could be. But we ran afoul because when you run afoul with those youth, you run afoul with Newt, because I know what can be. And if we do not invest in our young people, those chickens will come home to roost and you will see the crime and the problem that you see plaguing us now. But for those programs and those opportunities, I would not be one of 120 members, 40 senators, governor, CFO, ag commissioner, attorney general. I would not be one of 164 in charge of 67 counties, 512 cities and 22 million people. So I know what could be done. We bumped heads a lot because they didn't want to fund those youth programs. And now we got people that want to go out to these visuals and they want to have talks and talk to the kids and they want the guns going. Well, if you don't pour into them and change their trajectory, it's going to be more of the same. That's Einstein's definition of insanity. I think Kreisman did the best he can. I don't agree with a lot of it, and especially the way he's handling Tallahassee. If you know about the budget, we had a lot of things that in the veto list for St. Pete that got vetoed because of his relationship with the governor.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Representative Wengay Newton.